Beyond the buzzer, inside the game, this is Sports IQ with Larry Smith.
Hard to believe, already middle of the week. We're glad you're with us there. Larry Smith, Sports IQ, producer Tony, editor Josh, getting things done as well. We are happy to bring this to you every single week. If you're just joining us, every single day, I should say, Monday through Friday, we're here. And it's just smart. It's just smart sports chat. You know, we're not screaming at you. We're not yelling. We're not cursing. Grandma can listen. Kids can listen. All of that. It's always good fun. Listen, it's good fun unless you're a Mets fan. 12 straight losses right now. TJ French joining us here in a couple of minutes to talk more about the things going on there in Queens. Oh, boy, it's bad. We'll try to see if we can kind of figure that out with him. On the other end of the spectrum, Indiana football, reigning national champions. Tomorrow night is their big spring football game. Their quarterback also at the same time will be picked number one in the NFL draft. So big things going on in Bloomington. Shannon Griffith, the coach, joining us once again. Friend of the show. Always good to talk with him. We'll catch up on the Hoosiers as they revel in being national champs in football for the first time ever. Imagine being like Rip Van Winkle, waking up. Let's say you went to sleep, pick a year, any year. Waking up today and someone says, yeah, Indiana is your national football champion. He would think, who gave me those bad berries out of the woods? That doesn't happen. Come on. Anyway, that's all coming up. Let's get to a couple of headlines for you before we get to TJ. There are always debates in sports about who the best players of all time are. Basketball, one game where the debate about the GOAT goes on all the time. Some say Russell, Chamberlain, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, Magic, past decade. Current fans will say LeBron. We won't get sucked into that debate, but we do want to point out, for all of LeBron James's heroics, what we see in these first two games of the Lakers-Rockets series could be among his greatest work. LA came into the series knowing they would be without Luka Doncic or Austin Reeves, right? Each on the shelf with injury. Lakers' big three down to just LeBron and some toys left on the island of misfit toys with the King Moonracer. Yeah, if you don't get the reference, ask your kids about it when Christmas rolls around. When you think of supporting cast, you think of Jordan with Pippen and Robin, maybe Curry with Clay and Draymond, maybe Bird, Parrish, McHale. No one's going to confuse any of those with LeBron, with Smart and Kennard. Mention that trio with the others, you might get laughed out of any sports bar in the country. But last night, that's what King James had in Game 2 against the Rockets. James, 28 points, Marcus Smart, 25, Luke Kennard, 23. That improbable trio outdueled the Rockets trio of Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun, and Jabari Smith by 15 points. LA winning by 7. They take a 2-0 series lead. In case you're wondering when the last time the Lakers lost a series after leading 2-0, it was back in 1993 when they won the first two as an 8 seed against Phoenix, only to have the number 1 seed Suns rally back and win the first round best of 5 series back then, 3-2. LA has never lost a series when taking a 2-0 lead at home. What of James? Well, in these 2 games in LA, he's averaging 23 points, 8 boards, 10 assists. Not bad for a 41-year-old who's maybe contemplating retirement. In case you're wondering, Boston with a healthy Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and the Spurs with Wemby and company able to also go up 2-0 in their series with the 76ers and Blazers. They did not. Those series actually are now 1-1. Keep an eye out in San Antonio. The Spurs losing all-world center Victor Wembanyama after a hard foul by Drew Holiday. Wemby crashing to the floor jaw first. He's in concussion protocol. Now that raises the possibility of him missing multiple games. This happened in the first half. He missed the rest of the game. NBA rules state a player in the concussion protocol must have at least 48 hours of inactivity and recovery and then hit several benchmarks without symptoms before being cleared to play. A player must undergo neurological testing and receive a final clearance from a team doctor in consultation with the league's concussion protocol director. So, tough news there for Wemby and the Spurs. By the way, they did have a 14-point lead last night in the fourth quarter, only to see it slip away. 106-103 loss to Portland. San Antonio had won 76 consecutive playoff games when leading by 14 points or more in the fourth quarter. The last time they lost under those circumstances was back in May of 2003 against Dallas. Let's get back to baseball, though. The New York Mets we've been talking about in terms of just, how bad could it get? 12 straight losses now. And join us to talk more about just what's going on there with the Mets is TJ French, sports writer with Heavy.com. TJ, I think first time we've talked. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me. Thanks for extending an invite, and I'm glad to have a little open spot here in my schedule to make some time.
Yeah. No, we appreciate it. We know you're really busy. Well, listen, 7-16 right now. Let's just, I don't know where we start with this team. I guess back to spring training, and the Mets should sign all these contracts as we detailed yesterday on the show. All these guys come in, and yet, boy, nothing is working right now for this team.
Yeah, really, to me, the most strange thing about the losing streak and just the way that they've constructed this team, and David Stearns is obviously he's going to get a lot of flack right now because you have 16 losses, in April, and the month's not even over, right? You have the chance to get 20 plus wins, 20 plus losses in April is not a good sign. And obviously you're putting yourself way behind the eight ball. But the more concerning thing is David Stearns, he really did a complete roster turnover, with this Mets team, bringing in Bo Bichette, Luis Robert, Devin Williams, all guys in the bullpen. And the biggest issue is these Mets fans, they have no reason to like these players. They've done nothing in the first few weeks of the season to, gain that emotional attachment. And to me, that's the larger looming issue is you're going to have a hard time getting these Mets fans, which obviously we all know they have such a broad fan base and such a passionate fan base. It's going to be so difficult to get those fans back and engaged in this team because all the players that are new, they aren't homegrown Mets players. They came from a different organization and a different franchise. And now that they're, kind of stinking so bad, it's going to be really hard to kind of capture that back. But it just seems to be getting worse and worse by the day for the Mets. They've been swept in 3 straight series. They were swept by the Athletics, then the Dodgers, then the Cubs. Okay, you get swept by the Dodgers. Okay, I mean, a lot of teams do.
Yeah.
Then the Cubs, you go on the road and you get beat pretty bad a couple of the times. And then in the last game of the Cubs series, they hold a lead in the 9th. They lose it. And then again, and yesterday's game was just catastrophic against the Twins. They were up 3-0. Their starter, Nolan McLean, had a no-hitter working through the 6th inning or something like that. And they were up 3-0 and they give up 5 unanswered runs to eventually lose 5-3. So the losses, they just seem to be getting worse by the day.
It's one of those things that, to your point, like, yeah, even when things are going well, and then like yesterday, you think, okay, here we go. Mm-hmm. We got this, man. He's cooking. We're moving. We got the lead. And it still falls apart. And that's where I guess I go back to, is there a lack of leadership in the clubhouse? Is there, just who's, throwing bats and knocking over the water cooler? For a movie reference, Billy Bean coming in and busting up the boombox because they're dancing after a loss or whatever. Where's that moment that someone comes in and kind of shake things up?
Yeah, and yesterday's game, they tried to kind of lighten the mood a little in the clubhouse. They were, playing loud music and doing some antics on the field. But you're right, someone needs to take the blame. And like I said at the top, David Stearns is going to take the initial flack for the roster construction of this team. And listen, they've been without Juan Soto for 15 games. He's set to return today. Certainly that'll help, and you would hope that leads to some wins. But at this point, you think the damage, may already be done. But again, to your point, someone needs to step up and do that. You would think, Francisco Lindor, he's kind of the most tenured Mets player at this moment, could be that guy that should, smash a water cooler, break his bat over his knee. But, it just feels like this Mets team kind of lacks that flair. All their players, they seem kind of inept to like showing that passion on the field of, being really upset that they've lost 12 games in a row and have essentially played themselves out of playoff contention. And it's April 22nd. Like that's kind of a disaster. And, you have other teams, and listen, that, it's baseball. Like once the summer months come, things are going to tighten up and obviously going to get much more competitive. But, like I said, you can't have 20 losses in the first month and expect to, be putting yourselves in a good situation. And look, the Mets had really been relying on their starting pitching coming into this year. Mm-hmm. And that's in some ways failed them. David Peterson, he was an all-star last year. He's gotten off to a rough start. Kodai Senga is kind of off to a rough start as well. And now tomorrow on Thursday, they're starting a guy who hasn't pitched in Major League Baseball in nearly 2.5 years. So, I'm not sure they feel too comfortable about throwing him out there, as well. So if Nolan McLean or Freddie Peralta are not starting ball games, and they have been over this losing stretch, the Mets just can't pick up wins when they're out there. If they can't pick up wins when their top two starters are out there, they're going to have a harder time when these lesser arms are, getting put to the test against big league lineups.
Absolutely. Talking with TJ French of Heavy.com as we talk about the woeful New York Mets right now. Yeah, you're right. It's one thing to be struggling in June, but you're digging such a hole in a competitive division as well. I mean, everyone else is, it's not like there's any slouches. All these teams have had some recent success, and so they've got some things together there. Is this kind of the danger when you go into the offseason and you try to put together an all-star roster of a lot of free agents from elsewhere? You lose a bit of your culture and a bit of your passion, possibly, because there may be some guys who feel they're hired mercenaries. They came here for the dollars, and they'll get paid regardless. Is there any concern of that when you're a GM and kind of putting your roster together in the offseason?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly what David Stearns was doing in this past offseason when he brought in or signed Bo Bichette to such a lucrative contract, and brought in Devin Williams, Luke Weaver over from the Yankees, which, they thought obviously that would pan out a little better. But again, to your point, the Mets had such a disastrous collapse last season that they ended up missing the playoffs. And obviously the Mets fans were like, oh, the sky's falling. Like, how could this team with, Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz and Lindor, Juan Soto miss the playoffs? So when they missed the playoffs, I think David Stearns was like, okay, we're going to do a reshuffling of this roster. We're going to get rid of Jeff McNeil. We're going to get rid of Brandon Nimmo, which that was more of a contractual issue. But when and then they lose Pete Alonso to free agency and Edwin Diaz to free agency. When you lose those kind of critical franchise pieces, then to your point, they are trying to kind of reshape the roster with all-stars, with guys with a lot of talent and who come with a lot of baggage as well. And that just hasn't panned out. Now, of course, you can point to, if they would have signed one of the, Kyle Tucker or anyone else, any other, high dollar free agent, would it have worked out in a better manner, right? Like Marcus Semien, who they traded for Brandon Nimmo, just isn't hitting at all. And Brandon Nimmo is hitting with the Rangers now. It's the same thing. They traded away a lot of prospects and stuff for Freddie Peralta and Tobias Myers, while those guys have performed a little better than, let's say, a Semien. Again, hasn't translated to any wins. And, you can just, the list goes on with all their additions. They signed Jorge Polanco, who was expected to be their first baseman for, I think it was 40 million, 2 years, 40 million. And, he's on the injured list and not helping them right now. So, yeah, to your point, it's these guys come with a lot of baggage. And that's why David Stearns is going to take all the initial blame, is because he's the one who went out and signed all these players and made all these roster moves to kind of, last year it felt very obvious that the Mets wanted a refresh. They wanted new guys to be brought in the clubhouse. And, okay, let's see if we can, end up going to the World Series or at least the NLCS with a new cast of characters, which expectations are really high. I mean, their payroll is, I think it's $370 million plus dollars right now. And obviously if Soto's out of the lineup, that's a big chunk of that payroll out. So it kind of gets diminished, but still, like, these guys are getting paid among the, best in the league. And, you have other teams across the league with much less payrolls and much less talented rosters, and they're performing much better.
The good news for the Mets is the Phillies have been almost as bad. I mean, they're only a game ahead of them. So if the Mets can win a series, they could jump into fourth place. And Washington and Miami also not much better. But at the top of the division is Atlanta. And with a new manager, Brian Snitker steps down in the offseason, going into tonight 16-8. And they're one of a handful of teams in the National League off to a very, very good start here in the first few weeks.
Yeah, and look, I'm actually based very close to Atlanta, so I follow the team pretty closely. And I'll say one thing about the Braves is the baseball gods are certainly kind of turning the the tide on them a little bit. They had such a bad start in April last year, very similar to the New York Mets. Obviously, the Braves ended up missing the playoffs, so that's not good news for the Mets. But the Braves they pitched so well, and there's a lot of concern coming into the year about their starting pitching and all these guys hurt on the injured list. And then, could their bottom kind of the order guys end up producing? And look, the Braves have just really taken the league by storm, I think. I don't think anyone expected them to get off to, one of the best starts, obviously in the NL, obviously in all of Major League Baseball. They have Ronald Acuna back at full strength. He's the obvious spark plug guy, even though he hasn't been hitting all that well to start the season. But then you have guys like Michael Harris II, Matt Olson, who is just crushing the ball, Mauricio Dubon's a guy that they traded for who's been really good. The Braves have a lot of small moving parts, but, the Braves are playing much more together baseball, right? Doing the little things right, making less errors, driving guys in when needed, playing much better in the later innings, and their bullpen is so strong with Robert Suarez and Raisel Iglesias, and then there are other guys who they didn't pay, as high dollar for, are producing at a much better rate. So that's kind of been the Braves' MO this season. Again, there's still a lot of baseball left to be played. I mean, over 130 games.
Yeah.
And, the kind of cardinal sin in following baseball is you're not supposed to draw conclusions from what happens in the first 3 weeks of the season or the first month of the season, just because there's so much more baseball left to be played. But the Braves, obviously, as you mentioned, off to a great start. Look like they're running away with the division. But, like I saw yesterday, misery loves company. And that's the Phillies and the Mets right now. So
exactly.
That seems to be kind of what's going on with those two high dollar franchises.
Exactly. I want to get one quick question before I let you go. One more about the Mets. As we talk about, you mentioned in terms of Atlanta bringing in some lower price talent, but it's all fitting in together. How did the Mets not see Williams and Weaver struggling in the Bronx last year?
Yeah, I think they obviously I think they did to start the season, and Williams has been off to just an awful start. And this is like deja vu because he got off to such a bad start last year with the Yankees. But look, I to your point, I don't understand using him in the closer role so frequently because when the Yankees decided to switch their closer from Williams to Luke Weaver, Williams started to perform much better in the setup or the high leverage reliever role instead of being the ninth inning guy. So again, the Mets, they love to, it's funny, they love to kind of pickpocket the Yankees and steal their free agents away from them, but then they don't use them right. And then, they're in the same exact situation as before. So no, as your point, it's very puzzling. And I do expect that Carlos Mendoza, for however long he is still the manager, I know you mentioned, blame and someone having to be blamed. I think it'll end up being Mendoza, here quickly if they don't pick up some wins. Unfortunately, it's you got to win at some point, right? This isn't, the NFL or the NBA where you can drop X amount of games in a row, and still be in solid job security. Like this is getting concerning and someone's going to have to be scapegoated. But I do expect Mendoza to make at least some changes as far as with his relievers and especially the utilization of Weaver and Williams. But look, Weaver has also struggled in during this losing stretch and getting some high leverage roles and also blowing games. So it's kind of like, well, where do you go if both the guys are kind of struggling and you can't trust either of them?
Yeah, exactly. Crazy times there. Maybe they get a couple of wins here the next a couple of days to kind of right the ship a bit and begin to, like you said, seasons are determined the first 3 weeks, and we know that. We've seen that before. But with every loss, those odds of getting into the postseason, they get longer, right? Mm-hmm. So, TJ, listen, great to talk with you. Enjoy the division overall, Mets and Braves as well, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
All right, appreciate it. TJ Frentz talking about the New York Mets and their struggles right now. You can find him on heavy.com and really appreciate his time here on the show. More to come after this.
Those old golf clubs sitting in your garage right now, there's a good chance they're worth real money. That driver you replaced, those irons you upgraded, even that putter collecting dust. Golf Roots lets you trade them in for cash or credit toward your next set. And right now, Sports IQ listeners get exclusive offers. Take $20 off any order over $100 with code SIQSALE, or get a 15% bonus on your trade-in value with code SIQTRADEIN. That means the clubs in your garage could be worth even more. Golf Roots is on a mission to make golf more accessible, offering high-quality, pre-owned name brand clubs for every skill level. And if you're just starting out, the Just the Roots starter set is one of the most affordable ways to begin, with full trade-in credit when you're ready to upgrade. So don't let your old gear sit there losing value. Go to golfroots.com and see how you can start or upgrade your golf journey today. Use code SIQSALE for $20 off or SIQ trade-in for 15% extra when you trade in your old clubs. That's golfroots.com. Golf Roots. Upgrade smarter.
Do you want to save money on your next flight? Then pick up the phone and call. That's right, call. Because the best prices on airline tickets are not online. They're with SmartFares. See, SmartFares has special deals with the airlines. When they have unsold seats, they use SmartFares to fill them. So you get airline tickets at ridiculously low prices. They have access to great prices and discounts with over 500 different airlines, plus 300,000 hotels and rental car companies. Their prices are too low to publish online. The only way to learn more is make a free call. With the extra money you'll save, you can book another trip or treat yourself to dinner or shopping. So stop searching all of those travel sites to find the lowest price on your next trip. Let one of our SmartFares expert travel agents find the best prices for you. Call SmartFares today and get the best price on your next trip.
You're listening to Sports IQ with Larry Smith.
Well, midnight last night, the college basketball portal closed. Not closed like the portal in New York City in the first Avengers movie. No space aliens came to Earth to destroy it. The portal closing with little fanfare. Reportedly, probably, more tthan 2,000 players were in this. It's hard to kind of get a figure. It feels like at some point everybody is in there. Duke making a big splash hours before the portal closed, picking up John Blackwell from Wisconsin, third team All Big Ten honoree, shooting guard averaging 19 points, 5 rebounds, and a couple of assists a game for the Badgers last year. 6'4" guard, has one more year of eligibility left. He'll be ring chasing with the Duke club that also reeled in top 30 Belmont transfer of forward Drew Sharnowski, retained big man Patrick Ngongba for his junior year, and also will get Caden Boozer back for his sophomore season, including, of course, the plethora of high-ranked freshmen. Now, teams can still sign players already in the portal. Some players in the portal also enter the NBA draft. Players in the draft have until May 28th to decide to pull their name out and return to school. So there will still be a lot of player movement to come. You just can't enter the portal. If you not enter the portal or declare for the draft, you are then locked into your team for the coming year. If you don't think Michigan winning a title has influenced college coaches, think again. Remember, the Wolverines became the first basketball team to have a starting 5 of all transfers to win a national title. Now, a few schools are using that model for this season. Louisville signing Flory Badunga, the big man from Kansas, Jackson Shellstad from Oregon, Carter Knox from Arkansas, also Alvaro Figueres. He was the player who hit the game-winning shot for Iowa that knocked out defending champ Florida in the second round of the NCAA tournament last month. How about Indiana? Collecting players like Mom used to collect green stamps after grocery shopping. Remember those? The Hoosiers adding Marcus Burton from Notre Dame, Aiden Sherrill from Alabama, Darren Harris from Duke, also a player from SMU, Bryce Lindsey, Villanova, Jaden Mustaff from Georgia Tech. Rick Barnes wants to win a title at Tennessee before he retires from coaching. The Vols adding Terrence Hill Jr. from VCU, Jalen Harrelson from Notre Dame, Miles Rubin, Loyola Chicago, Tyler Lundblade from Belmont, and from Cal, the point guard, Day-Day Ames. How about Barnes' old team, Texas? The Longhorns went from a play-in game to an Elite Eight run. Now they have added David Punch from TCU. He's a nice big man for the Horned Frogs last year. Elijah Freeman from Auburn, Isaiah Johnson from Colorado, Amari Evans from Tennessee. Next few weeks, interesting to see who had what in the never-ending arms race that is college basketball. By the way, I think LSU still has only 1 or 2 players. So we'll watch and see what scraps they pick up and what Will Wade does. It says something for Will Wade that none of your players at NC State followed you to LSU. Just thinking about that. Hey, a couple of other notes before we get to Shannon. Churchill Downs making the announcement they have purchased the Preakness Stakes, the rights to the Preakness Stakes for $85 million. This deal will go through after this year's Preakness Stakes coming up here in a few weeks. And so that means what they'll do is they will lease the rights back to the state of Maryland for that race. So now the Kentucky Derby and Preakness Stakes under the same ownership, the first two legs of horse racing's Triple Crown, starting in 2027. Speaking of next year, no PGA Tour stop in Hawaii. It just seems like sacrilege. That was always a thing that you always kind of, went out there for the first 2 weeks of the season, kind of got your, got your legs under you. The wives and girlfriends hung out at the beach. Not happening in 2027. However, the PGA Tour CEO, Brian Rolap, speaking on the Pat McAfee show, that the league is, quote, thinking about, end quote, pathways for live golfers to rejoin the tour. Several reports indicate that funding for live may be expiring in the coming years. Now, Brooks Koepka already returned earlier this year to the PGA Tour, but some other top golfers like Jon Rahm, Bryson DeChambeau, Cameron Smith, and others still remain. Okay, let's talk a little football. Let's talk a little Indiana transfer portal as well coming up. Indiana basketball. Yeah, we still talk about that. Coach Griff is up next on the show.
We all make more than 35,000 decisions a day. Most are small, but some can be life-changing.
When it comes to taking care of yourself, the most important choices can be hard to make. Like having a tough conversation instead of ignoring a buddy's call.
Or being there for support, not assuming things will just get better. Make the decision to be there for the veterans in your life, for your community, for yourself. Learn more at BeThereForVeterans.com.
You're locked in to Sports IQ with Larry Smith.
Talking a lot of stuff here about college sports transfer portal, which has just been interesting. Only a 2-week window this time for college basketball. Joining us now to talk more about what Indiana has done in this offseason, Shannon Griffith, the coach. He's with the Hoosiers.com. Coach Griff, good to see you again. Let's talk first off about the Indiana Hoosiers. Didn't make an NCAA tournament bid. They declined NIT, went right to work on identifying their needs in the portal. And once that portal opened, they've been one of the big movers here in these past couple of weeks.
Yeah, they have been. And while I'm more of a football guy, if you live in Indiana or born and raised in Indiana, if you don't know a little bit about basketball, they kick you out of the state. So, I think Coach DeFries has done quite well. I think some have even linked his ability in the portal to what kind of Coach Cignetti has done with the portal himself. And going out and identify guys that fit his system of play, but also fit the dollars and cents of it as well, and not chasing guys for the sake of just throwing a bunch of money at them. That's what Cignetti has done really well with, is managing the dollars that's in front of him. Mark Cuban has even talked about that when he added additional money to the program right around the national championship. He talked about Sig's approach in terms of being able to identify but not chase 4 and 5 stars and just throwing a bunch of money at them, being very smart with it. And I think that's what Coach DeVries has done with some of the guys that he's gotten. They needed a big man. That hurt them more than anything this year, was having that guy inside that could get some tough inside rebounds as well as points. And they got that young man from, I think it was SMU. Don't ask me to pronounce his name. All I know is he's a 7-footer. And, a big inside threat. And, then he's pieced some people around him that I think will bolster their at least their first 5, but also the inside game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no question about that. And I think that's where, as we get into this new era of college sports, but college basketball, since we'll stick with that for the moment, that's going to be the next piece of this. We saw Kentucky openly talk about last year a $22 million roster, and the pieces never seemed to fit. Now, they had some injury problems too. And I think the fans are a little unfair with Mark Pope because 3 of the key players he brought in were injured, and so the vision never came together. But at the same time, these weren't guys who were 5-star future NBA players that Kentucky used to sing. Not saying they weren't good players, but how was that $22 million allocated? And I wonder if that's why Kentucky's been slower in this portal season, is maybe they're taking a different approach and being a little more measured in terms of how they evaluate and who they make offers to.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing as a coach. And, I think that's kind of what Mark Cuban was referencing with Signetti, is having a idea of where your dollars are going to slot at and who those type of guys are.
Mhm.
And if they can do it, then that's going to be where the money is going to go, and not just throw a bunch of dollars at a guy that you think's a, big time player for your program, and you start dropping big dollars. You just don't have anything to spread around. So being smart in your allocations and things is going to be the more important thing. And, whether it's a Kentucky or Indiana or Kansas, that's what these coaches have to ultimately do. And that's why you see these big recruiting staffs now that you have in, player development and roster management. Those are the guys that behind the scenes are helping with the allocations of dollars and cents and who should they target. So it's not just on the head coach, but it's, a broader effort within the organization nowadays. And it's really, let's call a spade a spade. It's a microcosm of the NBA.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. The difference is, in some ways, it's worse because the NBA, at least you have contracts. You know that you have a guy
Yeah.
for 2, 3, or 4 years if you choose to have that. In the Big Ten right now, it feels like that's, and I hope that Indiana and Coach DeVries are kind of linked in for a while to try to build this program back to the elite status. You've got obviously Michigan coming up with the national champion, Illinois a Final Four. Purdue has been right there, a Final Four recently. Michigan State is always there. You have these other programs that kind of as the established bullies right now in the conference, and it's going to take some time to get back into that, back on that porch.
Yeah, and I think Coach DeVries, I think he's got the right makeup of what it takes to win at Indiana. I think he understands that. I know. A few years ago, they wanted Dusty May, who's now the Michigan head coach, to come. And, he's in Indiana.
Yeah.
He has a huge Indiana tie.
Yeah.
And
Terre Haute, yeah.
Yeah. And so I do think Coach DeVries will ultimately get to that point where they get a consistency within the program. And I know the administration here understands that you do have to give guys some time. Now, in today's world, what does that mean? Is that a 3-year window, 2-year window? Who knows? I think ultimately, if you see the progression, you keep it with a guy. And I think that's what you're going to see with DeVries. And kind of like with Pope, DeVries didn't get in till late. He was coming in late trying to put a staff together, but also trying to rebuild a roster that was completely depleted. So he was trying to do a lot in a short period of time, and he put together the best type of squad that he could under that moment. Now he's got a full recruiting cycle, and I think you're seeing some of that come to fruition now with some of the guys that the pieces that he's added to the roster. Now, like you just said, whether a kid is worth every penny or a bust, we won't know that until they get going and playing. But on paper, it looks like a pretty solid transfer portal, and I think he's done quite well with the recruiting base, because ultimately that's the point that sometimes it gets lost. That's the foundation of your program, and it's easy to think that, we'll just go out every year into the portal. Well, you keep doing that, and you're probably going to get burnt because you're just not going to have anything behind it. And that's one thing that I think that's the big juggling act in basketball, is how many guys do you go out and bring in on top of what you're bringing in freshman-wise.
Yeah. And I think, too, that, and again, not to pick on Kentucky, I think that's Kentucky's issue, is that it was a constant roster turnover every year, but John Calipari knew how to manage that, where Mark Pope does not. And I think that's an issue right now. Coaches have to deal with, to that point. What is your culture? And I think, again, one more time for Kentucky, I'll leave them alone. What is Kentucky's culture right now? And I don't know that they can answer that. And that's where you're a new coach like Coach DeVries, or your Coach McCollum over in Iowa. They had the great run of the tournament in the Elite Eight. Tom Izzo, you know exactly what that culture is. If you're a new head coach, then you got to establish it. There's no question. You mentioned Curt Cignetti. It's one thing that I think where he's changed the game in terms of changing the culture immediately. And then to your point, finding players to fit what he's trying to do, and he had great success in 2 years. It feels like that Indiana and even other places, that's bleeding over even to basketball. People trying to figure out what he's doing and replicate that model.
Yeah, I think, some, whether it's football, basketball, I think everybody kind of leans on each other, just like you said, because it's such a new format in terms of how you set things up. What do you do? And like I said, I think Coach Signetti has a great player development staff in place, a gentleman that is in there breaking down the tape, keeping track of kids. Even though they recruited them, maybe they went somewhere else, they're, keeping tabs on them. But, I think, Sig was been able to do was have a group of guys first came with him that understood the culture, that was able to teach what players that were there at Indiana, what that meant. And I don't want to think that wasn't a very important part of his transition, because it was. Not everybody has that luxury that Sig had of bringing the number of guys that he was able to bring from James Madison. So, but I think what Sig is able to do is identify guys that fit his system and not get caught up on how many stars there are, and sometimes that's what hurts recruiting, is you get caught up by how many stars somebody is, but you're missing the guys that you've won with, which are those guys that were maybe overlooked, or he was underdeveloped and he was a guy that needed to be developed and things of that nature. And if you look at Indiana, that's the type of guy that they won with, bringing in guys that fit that cycle that he had in place. And then that ultimately improved him. So that's the key, is finding that mix of whatever that is. The biggest thing is you can't lose sight of is your freshman recruiting. You've got to have the foundation that ultimately you're not going to the portal every year looking to replace 9 guys on either side of the ball because you're graduating and there's nothing behind it. You ultimately have to be able to bring guys along, develop them so that when they are that third-year player, they can step in and play at a level that you don't need to go out and get somebody. I think that's the trick to this thing, is how many teams are going to be able to develop their roster and not ultimately every year having to go out and pick up 20, 23 guys, because that's what you need, because your roster's depleted of younger talent because they've left.
Right. Yeah. And that's the piece too. The guys you bring in, that they buy into the system, they see the vision that work now, and you'll have your time later. Talking to the coach, Shannon Griffith here from Hoosiers.com. Let's talk a little football. You were telling us a moment ago, the national champion Indiana Hoosiers had their spring game on Thursday. What will this be like? A spring game unlike any other, with the national championship team on the field.
Well, there's no question that there is a lot of excitement around Indiana football that we've seen, develop when Coach Sig first got here. There was an enthusiasm that extended way outside of Bloomington, and I think that's continued. The coupling of that is the big weekend at Indiana's campus with the Little 500 race that's on Saturday. So they make it a pretty big event for Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday there on campus, so that when people do come down, they're coming in for a big weekend on campus. So it'll be interesting to see, do they get a lot more bodies in the seats? Sig has never been big on the spring phase of things in terms of a true spring game where you're going to go out and play 4 quarters. They maybe play a half. I know right now they're banged up a little bit. They've got some guys that are out, not necessarily from spring, but from playing 16 hard, tough games that went all the way to the month of almost February. And they've got some guys that are not involved right now due to bumps and bruises, and they're just not going to push them to get them out there for that reason. So I think it's going to be an exciting night there in Bloomington. I think the people are going to look for, what does Josh Hoover look like? Is he a guy that's going to be able to take over and have the productivity that Fernando Mendoza had? Who's going to be behind Josh Hoover? Is that Grant Wilson? Is that Tyler Cherry, who sat out last year because he had a major knee surgery at the end of his freshman year. So there's still a lot of question marks for this Indiana team that I don't think are going to be totally answered at the end of spring. But I do think you'll get a pretty good feel for what they've got. And on paper, they got a loaded running back room. Wide receiver room looks very, very good. You got Nick Marsh and Shaz Preston that are come in out of the porter. Tyler Morris, who came from Michigan a year ago, got hurt. Now he's back into the fray. Of course, you don't want to forget about Charlie Becker and what he's been able to do. So they're good there. Tight end especially is going to be a question mark. And then defense, my goodness, they really reloaded, and their defense looks really good, even though they lost a lot of production.
We'd be remiss as well that any eyes not on Bloomington will be on Pittsburgh in the NFL draft. I'm wondering if part of the festivities there Thursday night, they will have ESPN up on the big board as Fernando Mendoza gets taken number 1 overall by the Raiders. What a moment that's going to be as well.
Yeah, well, I know that some people were a little miffed that they were going to do a spring game at 8:00 on the day that you have the NFL draft. So I guarantee it, there's probably going to be a little bit of that going on, maybe a pause when that actually happens. Yeah. But there's a couple guys that outside of Fernando, you got to look at Omar Cooper, I think is going to get picked pretty high. Where D'Angelo Pons lands will be interesting. Is he a first 3-round guy, or is he going to be a 4th-round type of player? So there's going to be a lot of excitement around that Thursday, Friday, Saturday for the NFL draft, because Indiana will probably have as many guys taken in any year this year. But you're correct. I do think there'll probably be some type of pause in the midst of that spring practice, spring game to have a look at the big screen to see Fernando, who's not going to be there, by the way. He's going to stay. He chose to go home to Miami to be with his family, which is understandable. His mom's got MS, and I don't think it's easy for her just to travel somewhere. And I do think that was the right choice for the young man to be there with his family. And what a night that will be for them, because it's something that that young man has worked a lot, really hard for, considering where he was at as a senior in high school.
Yeah. And what a moment of character for him, because that's the iconic moment, right? Number 1 overall pick, and you're on stage with the commissioner holding your jersey, but he's opting to stay at home as well. And I'm sure the NFL, like you said, they're going to do some things to make up for that moment, to make sure it's something that's visually one for the ages as well. His story just keeps writing out special chapters. Shannon, good to talk to you as always. I know we've taken a lot of your time here. Man, what a great week in Bloomington. Enjoy this time. This is something that we, you don't, and you're never guaranteed to have another one. So with Coach Sig, I'm not betting against him. So
no, not too many do now.
Yeah, I've learned. Coach, thanks, man. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
You too, buddy. Thanks.
Okay, Coach Griff. Once again, Shannon Griffith with Hoosiers.com. Little Indiana basketball. Good to talk Hoosiers basketball there. As football has really dominated so much. And again, big week there, as he mentioned, there at Memorial Stadium, Thursday night. Fernando Mendoza, Little 500. Times are good. They're in Indiana. All right, stay with us. More to come after this.
Listen, were you forced into getting a solar contract and now you just don't want it anymore? Maybe the solar company misled you. Or is your solar contract buried with hidden fees? Are you not saving the amount of money you thought you would on your energy costs? Don't worry. At the Solar Exit Hotline, we can help you cancel your solar contract, even if the panels are already installed. Our experienced legal team will review your contract and help you cancel it, possibly saving you thousands of dollars. You gotta call right now for complete details. So listen, if you're not happy with your solar contract for any reason, we are here to help you cancel it. Call the Solar Exit Hotline now for immediate options to help you exit your solar contract. This call is 100% free.
Call 855-227-0286. That's 855-227-0286. Call us right now.
Are you paying too much for term life insurance? There's a tremendous price war among the major term life companies. Rates have dropped dramatically in the past 2 years. For example, a man age 45 non-tobacco user, $1 million of coverage is only $75 per month, level for the next 10 years. Or a man age 50 non-tobacco user can buy $500,000 of coverage for a monthly premium of only $110, guaranteed not to change for the next 20 years. That's right, level rates for 20 years. And if you're a smoker, we have great rates for you as well. At the Term Lifeline, we specialize in policies of $500,000 and above. So if you're looking for new or replacement term life insurance, call right now for a free quote.
Rates and availability may vary by state. Sample rate quotes are based on preferred non-tobacco underwriting exam required to qualify.
Call 855-826-7932. 855-826-7932. That's 855-826-7932.
Man, great conversation there. By the way, tomorrow we've got Mike DeCourcy of Sporting News talking a little college basketball transfer portal news. Obviously, we'll kind of recap the season and how this NCAA tournament went. Producer Tony joining us right now, someone who never tasted the NCAA tournament, LeBron James. But boy, at age 41, we talked at the top of the show, he may retire at season's end. Then again, with the way he's playing this series, he may decide to hang on one more year. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, you expected coming into this series when KD missed the first game for the Rockets, okay, maybe the Lakers had a shot. Now KD's back in game 2. You figure, okay, look, here's where the Rockets go. We're done playing with you. We need to move on, because you're banged up and hurt. And other than those three, your parts are all, look, I'm not taking anything away from Marcus Smart and Luke Kennard, but really? I mean, that hardly, puts fear into opposing managers, chest when they think about, okay, we've got to face Marcus Smart and Luke Kennard tonight. Ooh, what shall I do? Well, we'll probably win. I mean, and the LeBron has been able to get them to collectively be better than what they should be. It's kind of impressive to me. And hats off to JJ Redick as well, because you didn't know what kind of coach he was going to be, coming in and taking over this Lakers squad, but he's done a good job. I'm shocked they're up 2-0 at this point with all those injuries, and playing as well and playing defense. Defense. They have held the Rockets way under their scoring average in this series, way under their shooting average, and that's just not a fluke to me. So, hats off to them at this point.
Yeah. And I think, too, with LeBron, I've been critical that LeBron can't play for a veteran coach. He hasn't played for a veteran coach since Paul Silas, his second season. He was brought in as the mentor type there in Cleveland. But LeBron did this with Cleveland as well when they reached the finals for the first time back in 2007. Had a lot of guys there that were not superstars, on those teams. And yet he put them on his back and guided them. And he's kind of doing the same thing now. To your point, if you're a Houston team coming in saying, I don't have Luka and I don't have Reeves to deal with, great, we got this. And instead they're going home down 0-2 and they've got they got to figure some things out. They may not get back to LA at this point.
Right. They've got to figure out how they're going to get some wins and how they can get some offense going, because they're not getting anywhere right now. And the neat thing, Larry, is LeBron's doing it in ways he hasn't done before. He would always have a few assists. He'd have a few rebounds, but it really was about the scoring. Everything ran through him in those Cleveland teams, especially like he had to score 30 a night. Now he's scoring in the mid-20s, but he's not scoring 30, 35, 38 and carrying the offense. He's distributing the ball. He's finding open shooters. He's rebounding. He's helping call the defense. I mean, his basketball IQ is off the charts. We've all known that for so long. And he's really using it in this series, to kind of show what LeBron James is at this point. Look, at 41, you can't do the things you did at 27 or 26. But you can do certain things a little bit better because of that age.
Yeah. And I think of really, the obviously people, and I'm not starting a GOAT debate, LeBron or Jordan, but it's very Jordan-esque in terms of Jordan under Phil Jackson, a veteran coach at the time. Under Phil Jackson, he laid off in the regular season and turned it on the postseason and did so much more. And it's a little bit like that now with LeBron. like you said, you can't teach smarts. You can't just make somebody a smarter basketball player. But LeBron now with 2 decades in the game knows this game, knows the angles and studies the game. And he is one of the all-time greats. And, it's one of the really cool storylines developing here in the playoffs. If they get past this Houston team, they're halfway toward doing that, as we talked about before. They've never lost a series when they were gone up 2-0. We'll see what happens. So LeBron and the Lakers, Game 3 coming up in Houston. All right, our moment of awe is up next.
I get a lot of calls from people across the country who are suffering from the affliction of IRS tax debt, and that's because I have a remedy. Hi, I'm the tax doctor, and if you're having any of these tax issues, call me right now. My team specializes in helping people over the age of 50 solve their tax problems, and the bigger your tax problem is, the more money you can save. If you owe the IRS money, or you're about to owe the IRS money, or even if you need to file years of unfiled returns, call us right now. Our friendly, highly trained representatives are waiting right now to take your call. Over the years, we've helped thousands of people just like you stop the tax liens, wage garnishments, and harassing phone calls. You don't need to send the IRS a big fat check. We can negotiate a lower amount. That's what we guarantee for you. So call us right now. Call 833-789-3068.
Okay, time now for a moment of awe. And it goes back to this. The first National League Baseball game played ever on this date in 1876. Now, I know you may be saying, hey, wait a minute, Larry. The Cincinnati Reds are the oldest pro team. They began back in 1869. You're right, and they played other teams for years in a loosely organized league that was without leadership and largely without rules. Along comes the National League in 1876 that changed all that. The Boston Red Caps going to Philadelphia to beat the Athletics, not these Athletics we know now, a different Athletics team, although still named for the Athletics Club of Philadelphia, 6-5. The rules were different back then. The mound only 45 feet away from home plate instead of 60 feet 6 inches, and the pitches were supposed to be thrown underhand, although that often didn't happen. By the way, you can read more about this on history.com, and you can actually see vintage baseball played today in several cities in Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio. Find the Bluegrass Barons page on Facebook for more information. That's our moment of awe. And that's our show for today. We appreciate our guests stopping by. TJ French talking Mets, also Shannon Griffith talking IU basketball, yes, and football. Always appreciate you as well. Make it a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to Sports IQ with Larry Smith, Monday through Friday. Continue the conversation at Sports IQ LS. We'll see you next time.